Hi! Today we're gonna do something very exciting. We're gonna build our own slaves. So, construction manual for a slave, cortex shutdown, how to enslave a human being. It's gonna be two methods to do it, video 1, method 1. First some theory. I will look at a neural network. It's a computer model of the brain to show some basic principles of brain operation. It's much simpler than the brain, of course, but it's easy to show the principles. A neural network has several layers, and each layer looks for a higher level of abstraction in the data coming from the senses. So, say you take your visual senses, the first layer get the raw pixel data, and it will detect some vertical lines, some horizontal, some basic shapes. Then it passes on to the next data, and the next data groups the shapes together and detects some more complex shapes. And that's how it goes on, and more higher principles of reality are uncovered by higher layers in the brain. And basically the brain makes a model of reality, a little parallel running model, and this model makes predictions all the time about reality, and correct predictions about reality are better than incorrect predictions in favor of basic survival. So if a rock falls down, you think, oh boy, this is gonna fall on my head if I do not move. If you make a correct prediction about it, very good for your survival. You might wonder, is my brain making predictions all the time? I'm not aware of that. Yes, it is, because if you, for example, put your foot on the stairs, you expect to feel something. And if it would sink in 10 centimeters and feel wet and cold, you would be surprised. And that surprise shows that you had made a prediction about how it would feel. And everything around you, continuously you make prediction of how it would feel, and if it feels different, you get an error function. It's like, whoa, something wrong with the model in the brain. The model needs to be adjusted. Reality is always right. But it means that consistent things like gravity, like Newton's laws, like bumping your foot into the table will hurt every time. This will be learned very well, because every experience reconfirms the previous experience, and it will be deeply engraved into your memory. That's also how it is often described, engraved into your memory. And inconsistent things cannot be learned. It's completely random. You cannot learn principles out of random stuff. So you cannot learn random stuff. How would you do that? That's what the definition is, random. So, even for animals like crows, these birds, it happens that if you show them a picture of something that is physically impossible, they will look at it longer. So they have a basic idea of physics, and that is of course because their senses took in physics and images of reality their whole lives, and their little brain has a little model of reality and things that can happen and can't happen. If you show them something that can't happen, they're like, what is that? So a kid, when it receives consistent things about reality, and the whole Newtonian physics stuff is always consistent, then it will be learned very well. But it also has a little box where it says, how does a human relationship work? And is this box filled with consistent data? And that depends very much on how the kid is raised, of course, because if it would see coercion taking place and person A coercing person B, then it has a problem, because he has to simultaneously put in his brain persons are coerced and persons are coercing, because he sees both at the same time. And there are not two boxes for these two people, because they're both people. They're in reality indistinguishable. They're the same kind of life forms. They're similar enough to fall under one principle. The brain cannot make a split there. There's no basis in reality to do so. A kid sometimes tries, men are coercive and women are being coerced or something, or blacks or whites, some hint in reality that at least makes it able to separate, make a separation there. But if you just see person A steal from person B, for example, then yeah, what does it is going in the box of how does a human possess property? Because at the same time he sees that someone's property rights are recognized and someone else's are violated. The guy who takes someone else's property at the same time, does not recognize the property rights of the guy who's stolen from, and he makes it his own property, so he expects to have property right of his own. So the kid sees this and he cannot attach anything to property rights of human beings because it contradicts your information. And this is a problem, so it will not be learned very well. And later when behavior is generated, these boxes are referenced for what kind of data should I generate. And if there's inconsistent information in there, then it will generate inconsistent behavior. And that's also what you see. Often kids who get into moral problems have a bad childhood in which they have not been shown morality very consistently. Now, how is this learning going on? Basically, you can see it as mathematically as a multidimensional energy landscape where you have to find a minimum. So you're dropped in this big landscape and you have to find where is the lowest point, and that is basically the error function. The height is the error function, the lowest error is the lowest point in the landscape, and the landscape symbolizes then all the parameters you have to tune in. Here you have only latitude and longitude and with a two-dimensional, but mathematically you can have a multi-dimensional landscape and you have to find a minimum in there. For the simplicity, we take a two-dimensional landscape with the height being the error function. Now, how do you find a minimum there? What you do is you take very big steps in the beginning, because if you start small, you might find a local low point, but if you're in the Himalayas, it will be still very high. So you first take big steps, find roughly the lowest area, and then gradually reduce your step size and optimize for the lowest point where you are. And basically that is how neural networks are often learned. And I think that's also how kids learn, because when you're young, they're very flexible. They can learn many languages easily, and when you're very old, then your freedom of movement of learning has been reduced, and you cannot learn whole new languages, for example, or whole new things. So how do we go about building our slave? Because that's how it all started. What we do is we put them in a coercive environment where they have to be obedient, and also say their parents are coerced for paying it. We could call this a public school, for example. And you store them there until the step size in their brain becomes very small. And their brain optimizes for this coercive environment as good as it can. It's very bad, difficult of course, because it's contradictory, but as good as it can, it starts to optimize. Error function becomes smaller, 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 step size becomes smaller, smaller, smaller. Then you put them into the real world, and what happens? They suddenly have to find a job voluntarily, relationships, they have to find a partner, voluntary relationship, friends, hockey club, all kind of things voluntary. The error function shoots up because their brain is not optimized for that. They feel very uncomfortable with this high error function because something is wrong in my brain, modeling reality, dangerous. So what will it do? The young adult will look for a coercive environment, because then the error function goes down and says, yeah, this feels familiar, that's how it's supposed to be. And that is basically how you build your slave. There's also facts from reality that show that this is the way the brain finds the minimum energy function, because, for example, kids who grow up in Romanian state orphanages without any love experience significant problems in relationships with people, even after being adopted by loving parents. So after their adoption, their brain were stepping around in the Himalayas looking for a new minimum, and it felt very uncomfortable because they were not optimized for that. It is basically, if you're dropped in the Himalaya and you have to find your way by foot to the Netherlands, that is very difficult for with a small step size to find this global minimum. So the idea how to go about it is to freeze their brains in the desired state when they're young, and the step size is small. They will never get out of it anymore, and they will never find a global minimum. It's In that way, the slave is like a thing from the IKEA. They get it gets prefabricated. A lot is prefabricated, but you have to do the last assembly yourself to get the ideal slave. Alright, did I say everything? I hope so. Okay, thanks. Better do later on.